Monsters don't just hide in shadows. Aria knew this truth better than anyone after 10 years of concealing her true nature among humans. The most dangerous place to hide was in plain sight, breathing their air, speaking their words bleeding red, just like them, even though her true blood ran silver as moonlight. Blackwood Falls, Oregon existed as a small haven nestled beneath the towering Sierra Mountains. A town with history stretching back to the frontier days, when brave men and women carved civilization from wilderness. Few knew the deeper history, how creatures of myth had walked these lands long before the first settler built a cabin. Aria stood at the massive wooden counter in Blackwood Manor's kitchen, her hands methodically kneading bread dough. The repetitive motion had become her meditation over the years, a way to keep her mind focused on maintaining her human disguise. Today, that disguise felt particularly fragile, like holding breath underwater with burning lungs. "The Colonel returns today," announced Margaret, the elderly housekeeper, as she bustled through the kitchen doorway. 3 days early from his Washington trip, Aria's hands stilled in the dough. Colonel Maxwell Blackwood, the very name sent currents of electricity through her false human form. Owner of Blackwood Manor and the surrounding 10,000 acres. Former Delta Force commander. Heir to one of America's oldest bloodlines. And something else entirely beneath his carefully constructed human exterior. She had managed to avoid him for 5 years since he returned from Afghanistan and took over the estate. Kitchen staff rarely interacted with the master of the house, but occasionally in the deepest hours of night, she sensed him a presence that pulled at her true nature like gravity. "Look sharp, everyone," barked Cook, a retired Army mess sergeant who ran the kitchen with military precision. "The Colonel doesn't tolerate sloppiness." The other servants hurried into motion, but Aria continued working the dough with newfound intensity. Flour dusted her arms like fresh snow as her mind raced through escape plans. Perhaps she could claim illness retreat to her small room in the servants' quarters until he left again. "And," Cook called, using the human name she'd adopted, "those loaves need to be perfect for the Colonel's table tonight." She nodded without looking up. Perfect bread was the least of her concerns when her very existence hung by a thread. Signs had been appearing lately. Children in town born with silver-flecked eyes, iron tools growing inexplicably warm, shadows moving independently of their casters. Her essence was leaking into the world despite her careful containment. The kitchen doors swung open. The air pressure changed instantly, becoming heavy with unseen energy. "At ease," came a voice deep as mountain bedrock. Aria kept her eyes fixed on the dough, but every other sense screamed in recognition. The voice belonged to a predator, not just human, but something ancient, wearing human skin, just as she was. Colonel Maxwell Blackwood had entered his domain, and her decade of hiding suddenly felt as substantial as morning mist. "Sir," Cook straightened to attention from old habit. "We weren't expecting you until Friday." "Plans change, Roberts." The Colonel moved into the kitchen with deliberate steps. Not the hurried pace of a businessman or the measured stride of military discipline, but something else, the calculated movement of a hunter. Aria felt his attention sweep the room, like searchlight beams passing over each servant until they found her. The weight of his gaze settled on her bent head with physical presence. She continued kneading, though her fingers had gone numb with fear. "New bread for tonight," he remarked, moving closer to her workstation. "Excellent." She couldn't avoid acknowledging him without seeming suspicious. Slowly keeping her expression neutral, she raised her eyes. Maxwell Blackwood stood 6'3", with shoulders broad enough to fill a doorframe. His face could have been carved from granite, all sharp angles and weathered planes. His hair, once military short, but now grown to touch his collar, remained black despite approaching 40. A thin scar traced from temple to jawline, evidence of combat from some classified operation. But it was his eyes that truly betrayed his inhuman nature, deep amber with flecks of gold that caught the light like a predator's. Those eyes locked onto hers, now widening fractionally in recognition. Time froze in the space between heartbeats. The kitchen with its gleaming counters and bustling staff faded to insignificance. There existed only this connection. Predator recognizing prey, darkness recognizing light, two ancient beings recognizing their counterparts beneath carefully constructed disguises. His nostrils flared slightly. She knew he was catching her scent, not the human persona she projected, but her true essence. Ethereal energy smelled like ozone after lightning, impossible to fully disguise from one with enhanced senses. "What's your name?" His question broke the suspended moment. Anne, sir. The lie slid smoothly from 10 years of practice. Anne Miller. Ansome. He rolled the false name across his tongue like testing unfamiliar food. How long have you worked at Blackwood Manor? Nearly 10 years, sir. 10 years. His eyes narrowed slightly. Yet I don't recall seeing you before. Cook intervened. Anne works mainly mornings, Colonel. Started back when your father was still alive. The Colonel nodded, his predatory gaze never leaving her face. And where were you before Blackwood Falls? South Dakota, sir. My family died during an outbreak there. Another practice lie. An outbreak. His lips formed something that wasn't quite a smile. Yes, many were lost during that time. He knew she was lying. She could see it in the predatory stillness of his stance, the way his head tilted, slightly as if considering a puzzle. Your shadow, Anne. His voice dropped lower, meant only for her ears. It moves, unusually. Ice filled her veins. Her shadow had been misbehaving more frequently lately, failing to properly mimic human movement patterns. She glanced down to find it stretching toward him with gossamer tendrils no human shadow would form. Must be the kitchen lights, sir. She stepped sideways, forcing her shadow to realign naturally. Must be. His tone made clear he believed nothing of the sort. He reached for one of her unbaked loaves, fingers deliberately brushing against hers in the process. The contact lasted less than a heartbeat, but the reaction was immediate. Silver fire raced through her veins, and her true nature surged against his bonds, desperate to answer whatever had called to it through his touch. She jerked back the bread, tumbling between them. For one horrifying moment, she felt her disguise flicker. The air around her shimmered with heat that had nothing to do with the ovens. Her shadow on the wall shifted wrongly, too many angles, too much depth, like a reflection in broken water. Forgive me, sir. She dropped to her knees, gathering the fallen dough, using the position to regain control over her form. How clumsy. Rise. The command was gentle but absolute. She stood on shaking legs as he studied her with an intensity that could peel paint from walls. You'll serve at tonight's dinner party, he announced. Cook began to protest. But Colonel Anne works in the kitchens, not tonight she serves. His tone brooked no argument. Then to her specifically, wear something appropriate for the main dining room. You'll attend the head table. The head table where she'd be exposed to every guest, every eye that might notice something amiss. Where she'd stand for hours under the scrutiny of humans who might sense her otherness. But worse, where she'd be near him with his inhuman senses and knowing eyes. One more thing. The Colonel turned at the doorway, his dark gaze finding hers across the chaos of the kitchen. Your shadow, Anne. You might want to tend to it. Her blood turned to ice as she glanced down to find her shadow stretched in impossible directions, writhing like something alive reaching toward him with tendrils that belonged to no human form. When she looked up again, he was gone, leaving only the echo of his presence and the terrible certainty that her decade of hiding had just ended. The grand dining room of Blackwood Manor transformed at sunset. Crystal chandeliers cast dancing light across walls adorned with antique weapons and portraits of stern-faced Blackwood ancestors dating back to Revolutionary times. The massive oak table gleamed beneath carefully arranged silver and china, while fresh-cut flowers from the estate gardens scented the air. Aria stood with the other servants in a side chamber receiving final instructions. Helena, the head housekeeper, adjusted the collar on Aria's borrowed uniform, a black dress with white trim that actually fit unlike her usual shapeless kitchen attire. Remember, Helena whispered sharply, pour from the right, never speak unless addressed directly, and whatever you do, don't look the guests in the eye. If only it were that simple. Aria's true concern wasn't etiquette, but survival. Her encounter with the Colonel that morning had weakened her disguise. Maintaining human appearance now required constant concentration, like balancing on a tightrope while juggling flaming torches. Tonight's guests include military officials, business associates, and Dr. Eleanor Reed from the Emeritus Institute. Helena continued adjusting uniforms and giving instructions. The Colonel expects perfection. Aria's attention snagged on the unfamiliar name. Emeritus Institute. Some research organization studying unusual phenomena. Helena replied dismissively. The Colonel has been consulting with them for months. The dining room doors opened and the servants moved to their positions. Aria took her place behind the head chair, hands clasped before her, eyes downcast. Her heart hammered against her ribs, too fast, too hard, too human. Guests began arriving in waves of expensive perfume and tailored clothing. Military men with ramrod postures, politicians with practiced smiles, business associates with calculating eyes. Aria recognized some from her years of hiding: Senator Williams with his booming laugh, General Patterson with his Medal of Honor, local magnates who treated Blackwood Falls as their personal fiefdom. Then came the announcement that made her bones ache. Colonel Maxwell Blackwood and Dr. Eleanor Reed of the Emeritus Institute for Supernatural Research. Supernatural research. The words echoed like funeral bells in Aria's mind. The colonel entered wearing a perfectly tailored black suit that absorbed light like a void. Beside him walked a woman in her 50s with steel gray hair pulled into a severe bun. Ravian wore a high-necked navy dress, but what caught Aria's attention was the necklace, a steel chain, supporting a pendant that made her true nature recoil. A shard of crystallized ethereal essence, still faintly pulsing with trapped life. Aria forced her breathing to remain steady as they approached. The colonel's eyes found her immediately tracking her as she took her position behind his chair. The trapped essence in Reed's pendant seemed to pulse faster as the woman drew near, recognizing its own kind. "Your home remains as impressive as ever, Colonel," Reed remarked as he held her chair. "Thank you for hosting our discussion on such short notice. Blackwood Manor has always opened its doors to those who protect American interests," he replied smoothly, taking his seat at the head of the table. The meal began with practiced efficiency. Aria moved mechanically, pouring wine, serving dishes, all while keeping her eyes lowered and her essence tightly contained. But every time she approached the head of the table, she felt dual pressures: the colonel's amber gaze tracking her movements and the pendant at Reed's throat growing perceptibly warmer. During the second course, Reed turned the conversation toward her purpose. "Colonel, the energy signatures we've been tracking across Oregon have intensified these past weeks," she said, voice pitched for discretion despite the clatter of silverware in conversation. "We believe they confirm our theory about surviving ethereal presence." Aria nearly dropped the wine decanter, catching it at the last moment. A single drop splashed onto the white tablecloth like blood on snow. "Careful," Reed said sharply, ice blue eyes suddenly fixed on her. "Nervous hands often indicate a guilty conscience." "Leave the girl be," the colonel commanded softly. "She's unused to serving the main table." "Of course," Reed's smile sharpened. "Though I must say, Colonel, your staff has an unusual energy about them. Perhaps we should discuss employee screening protocols as well." The colonel's expression remained neutral, but Aria sensed a dangerous stillness come over him, the calm before a storm. "My staff undergoes thorough vetting, Doctor. Now perhaps we should discuss these energy signatures you mentioned." Reed dabbed her lips with a napkin. "We've detected anomalies consistent with ethereal essence throughout the region. Silver-flecked eyes in newborns, unexplained electromagnetic disturbances, iron objects heating spontaneously." Each symptom Reed listed corresponded exactly with what Aria had observed herself: the gradual leaking of her essence into the surrounding environment, despite her careful containment. "Most fascinating," Reed continued, "we've traced the highest concentration of these anomalies to Blackwood Falls itself, almost as if something or someone has been hiding here, gradually affecting the environment." The colonel sipped his wine thoughtfully. "And what would the Emeritus Institute suggest as a response?" "Detection and capture naturally." Reed touched her pendant. "We've developed methods for identifying hidden creatures. Which brings me to my proposal: a security sweep of Blackwood Manor itself." "Impossible." The colonel's voice remained pleasant, but steel ran beneath it. "This estate has been private Blackwood territory since before Oregon achieved statehood. With all respect, Colonel, if an ethereal has infiltrated your household, national security is my primary concern." He cut her off smoothly. "Which is precisely why I'll conduct any necessary investigations personally." Tension crackled between them, battle of wills beneath civilized veneers. Aria continued serving, trying to make herself invisible, though her shadow occasionally stretched toward the colonel like a plant seeking sunlight. Disaster struck during dessert. Commander Harris, a retired Navy SEAL well into his cups, grabbed Aria's wrist as she poured his coffee. "Pretty thing," he slurred, fingers digging into her flesh. "The colonel always did have an eye for beauty. Perhaps you could serve more than coffee later." Well, the rage came instantly, involuntarily. Her true nature surged against its bonds, and for a split second her skin flickered, human flesh becoming translucent, revealing the silver starlight beneath. Harris jerked back with a cry, coffee spilling across the tablecloth. Her hand, "Did you see that?" Every head turned toward Aria. Reed half rose from her seat, eyes gleaming with predatory triumph. "You're drunk, Commander." The colonel's voice carried an undercurrent of power, not quite a command, but something deeper, more primal. "You saw nothing but candlelight and shadows. Apologize to Anne and retire for the evening." Harris's mouth worked soundlessly, fighting against the influence in those words before he mumbled an apology and stumbled from the room. But Reed had seen. Her ice-blue eyes locked onto Aria with naked hunger. "How fascinating, Colonel. Perhaps you'd allow me to perform a small demonstration. The Emeritus Institute has developed new methods for detecting hidden creatures." Before anyone could respond, she pulled a crystal vial of clear liquid from her clutch. "This solution contains blessed water mixed with steel shavings harmless to humans." She smiled thinly. "Would you permit a simple test?" The colonel's expression remained impassive, but Aria sensed the dangerous energy building around him, like static before lightning. "That won't be necessary, Doctor." "But I insist." Reed unstoppered the vial and stood. "For security purposes." She began walking around the table, letting drops fall on nearby servants, who merely looked confused as the liquid harmlessly dampened their clothing. "You see, completely safe for humans." Aria backed away as Reed approached, but the dining room offered limited escape routes. The doctor moved with deliberate steps, vial raised high. "Just a drop to prove you're human, Anne." Reed's voice dripped false sweetness. "Unless you have something to hide." Time slowed. The water arced through the air, catching candlelight like falling stars. Aria braced for searing pain, for exposure, for the end of her decade-long deception. A hand shot out, catching the solution before it could touch her. The colonel stood between them, the blessed water sizzling against his palm with the sound of meat on a hot pan. The dining room fell silent, every eye fixed on the colonel's smoking hand. "You're injured," Reed gasped, genuine shock cracking her composed facade. "And you forget yourself, Doctor." His voice could have frozen flame. "No one threatens what is mine." The possessive claim rang through the hall like a bell toll. "Mine." A predator's claim witnessed by dozens. Reed's eyes narrowed in calculation. "She's not human, Colonel. Surely you can sense it. And now I see you're not entirely human yourself." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "What are you protecting, guards?" The colonel's command brought 4 security personnel instantly to attention. "Escort Dr. Reed to the guest wing. She will remain as our guest until certain matters are resolved." As the guards surrounded her, Reed's gaze locked onto Aria with naked hatred. "The Emeritus Institute has been hunting your kind for decades, abomination. We won't stop now." The colonel turned to his remaining guest, composure perfect, despite his injured hand. "My apologies for the disturbance. Please continue enjoying your evening. I have a security matter to address." He strode from the room without looking back. Aria stood frozen, aware that dozens of curious eyes now studied her with new interest. Her disguise was intact, but suspicion had been planted. Questions would follow. She slipped away as the guests returned to their desserts, whispering theories about the strange confrontation. The grand hallways of Blackwood Manor stretched before her, moonlight streaming through tall windows to cast alternating patterns of silver light and deep shadow. She had to run. Tonight. Before Reed could summon reinforcements, or the colonel could determine exactly what she was. 10 years of careful hiding had come to this flight again, with nothing but the clothes on her back. Her reflection in a darkened window showed the truth, her disguise, failing human features flickering between flesh and starlight. She turned toward the servants' quarters to gather what few possessions she'd accumulated. "Stop running." The command came from everywhere and nowhere. The colonel emerged from shadows like he'd been born from them, his injured hand already healing, something she hadn't known werewolves could do. The air between them crackled with unspoken truths and dangerous possibilities. She pressed herself against the wall, searching for escape routes. "You knew," she gasped, heart pounding against her ribs. "From the moment you walked into the kitchen this morning, you knew what I was." "I suspected." He moved closer with predatory grace. "Your shadow, your scent, the way reality seems to bend around you like light through water. But it wasn't until tonight, until I felt the bond, when I touched you, that I knew for certain. There is no bond. The denial came desperate, automatic. Ethereals don't have mates. We can't. Lie to yourself if you must, he said softly, now close enough that she could see gold fracturing through his amber eyes. But don't lie to me. I've sensed you for years, Aria. Her true name on his lips shattered something inside her. The disguise collapsed entirely in a cascade of failure points. Light exploded from her skin, not harsh but liquid, like moonlight given form. Her hair floated as if underwater, shifting between silver and starlight. Her eyes became pools of infinite depth containing galaxies. She stood before him as she truly was, the last ethereal, a being of pure magical essence wrapped in a form that was almost but not quite human. The colonel didn't step back. Instead, he reached out, his fingers hovering inches from her luminescent cheek. Beautiful, he breathed like a man seeing stars for the first time. I'm an abomination, she whispered. Your people hunt mine. Reed will return with an army. Every moment I remain puts you in danger. I've been in danger since the day I returned from Afghanistan. His hand finally made contact, and where his skin met her ethereal form, silver light danced between them. My father didn't die naturally, Aria. He was poisoned by those who wanted a different master for Blackwood lands, one they could control. The confession hung between them. She saw the weight he carried, the loneliness of a position built on blood and betrayal. Why did you protect me tonight? Because my wolf recognized you before my mind did. His other hand came up, framing her face. For 5 years, I've felt this pull toward the kitchen, toward a servant who somehow made my wolf howl for its mate, because you're not the only one hiding your true nature. Before she could ask what he meant, he began to change. Not the fluid shift of a normal werewolf, but something primal and ancient. His bones broke and reformed his skin, rippling with fur that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. When the transformation ended, a massive wolf stood before her, but its eyes held too much intelligence, its form too large, its presence too otherworldly. First wolf, she gasped, recognizing the creature of legend, the original predator that existed before the moon goddess tamed them. Cursed, he said, voice strange coming from lupine jaws. My bloodline carries the curse of the first wolves. We're neither fully human nor wolf. We heal from wounds that should kill us, but bless water and steel burn us as they burn you. Monsters just like the ethereals. Understanding washed over her. That explained his resistance to commands, why the blessed water burned him. He wasn't purely werewolf, but something older, more primal. We're both remnants of the old world. He continued, shifting back to human form with unnatural speed. The healing ability made sense now. It wasn't wolf magic, but something more ancient. Perhaps that's why fate bound us together. He gestured toward the library doors. Reed is being watched. But first you need to tell me everything, why you're here, why you've been hiding what you're running from. Aria looked at this impossible alpha, this cursed man who'd claimed her, before dozens of witnesses who stood between her and blessed water, who showed her his monstrous truth without fear. My mother, Valeria, she began, her form flickering between human and ethereal as emotions surged. She didn't die in the Great Purge when humans hunted us. She became something else, something hungry. Valeria has been hunting me for 10 years, feeding on ethereal essence to maintain her twisted existence. I came to Blackwood Falls because the manor's steel wards work both ways, not just keeping magic out, but hiding it within. She looked up at the ancient protections built into the ceiling moldings, invisible to human eyes but glowing faintly to her true vision. I've been safe here until now. Glass shattered behind them. Through the broken window came creatures of living shadow, their forms writhing with corrupted magic. At their center floated a being that might once have been beautiful, an ethereal whose light had turned to darkness, whose essence consumed instead of creating. Hello, daughter, Valeria said, voice like breaking bells. Time to come home. Maxwell Blackwood, Colonel of American Special Forces and heir to the first wolf bloodline, stepped between Aria and the twisted creature who had once been her mother. His eyes blazed, gold claws extending from human fingers. She is under my protection, he growled, the sound rumbling from deep in his chest. This is Blackwood territory. Aria's mother laughed, the sound like shattering crystal. How charming. The little wolf thinks he can challenge me, her attention fixed on him with predatory interest. And what are you, not quite wolf, not quite human? How delicious. Mother, Aria stepped forward, silver light coalescing around her hands. You don't have to do this. The hunger can be controlled. Let me help you. Help me, her mother's twisted form pulsed with stolen light. You think I want to be cured? This isn't a disease, child. It's evolution. The shadow creatures lunged simultaneously, their forms spreading across the hallway like spilled ink. Ancient paintings crumbled at their touch, centuries of Blackwood history dissolving into ash. Aria's light flared instinctively, creating a barrier that made them recoil with shrieks that weren't quite sound. Protective of your pet human, her mother drifted closer. How disappointing. I raised you to be apex, not prey. You raised me to run, Aria spat back, her form solidifying with anger. To watch you drain our own kind for power. Maxwell moved to stand beside her, his cursed wolf rippling just beneath his skin. The anomalies Reed mentioned, they were you, weren't they? He asked Aria's mother. The little scientist, her mother laughed. She's been useful following my trail, flushing out hidden ones for me to harvest, though she doesn't know it yet. Her attention fixed on Maxwell with renewed interest. Now I understand why Aria hid here. The first wolf bloodline. Ancient protections built into the very walls. How clever. Get behind me, Maxwell commanded Aria. She grabbed his arm instead. No, she's here for me. This is my fight. Our fight, he corrected. Before she could protest, he partially shifted, not full wolf, but something between retaining human shape while gaining wolf attributes. His eyes blazed, gold muscles expanding beneath his torn dress shirt. You claimed me as yours when you ran. I claimed you as mine when I stood between you and the blessed water. That makes us pack. The word pack resonated with power older than nations. Her mother's expression twisted. Mate bonds, such primitive magic. She gestured and her shadow servants attacked again. The battle erupted in chaos. Maxwell fought like something from nightmares, too fast, too strong, tearing through shadows with claws that shouldn't exist. But for every shadow destroyed, two more formed from the spreading darkness. Aria's light began to falter. 10 years holding human form had weakened her, made her essence sluggish. She watched in horror as one shadow slipped past her failing barrier, heading straight for Maxwell's exposed back. No. She moved without thinking, throwing herself between them. The shadow's claws raked across her shoulder, tearing through ethereal form like paper. She screamed not in human voice, but in harmonics that shattered every remaining window in the hallway. Silver blood sprayed across ancient stone. Where it landed, flowers bloomed impossibly, moonflowers unfurling in seconds, their glow pushing back the darkness. The signs she'd been seeing, children with silver-flecked eyes, warm iron, suddenly made sense. Her essence had been slowly leaking into the world, seeding it with ethereal magic. Aria, Maxwell caught her as she fell, and something primal snapped inside him. The curse he'd controlled his entire life erupted outward. His form expanded, twisted, became something that belonged in humanity's oldest nightmares. Not wolf, not man, but the thing that spawned both 12 feet of muscle and shadow eyes like molten gold jaws filled with teeth that could crack mountains. The first wolf, the original monster. Even her mother stepped back. With a roar that shook the manor's foundations, Maxwell attacked not with strategy or skill, but with primordial rage. He tore through shadows like tissue, his very presence making reality buckle around him. The cursed bloodline that had been his family's shame became weapon, became wrath, became retribution. But her mother had lived 10 years feeding on power. As Maxwell charged her directly, she smiled and spoke a single word in the old tongue. Stop. The command hit him like a physical wall. Not a werewolf command, but something older, the same magic that had once bound the first wolves, forcing them to submit to the moon goddess. Maxwell crashed to his knees, his monstrous form fighting against invisible chains. Fascinating, her mother mused, circling him. The curse responds to the original binding. You're not just descendant of the first wolves. You are one reborn in flesh. She traced a claw along his jaw. I could make such use of you. Mother, Aria struggled upright, silver blood still streaming from her wound. Please, take me. Leave him. Take you, her mother laughed. Oh, daughter, I don't need to take you. You're going to give yourself to me. She gestured, and more shadows grabbed Maxwell, spreading him between them like a sacrifice. His monstrous form began to shrink, the curse being forcibly suppressed, leaving him human and vulnerable. Here's your choice, her mother said sweetly. Give me your essence willingly. Let me drain you properly, and I'll spare your mate. Refuse, and I'll make you watch while my shadows tear him apart piece by piece. Aria looked at Maxwell, suspended between shadows, his eyes still blazing defiance, even as his body failed him. She thought of 10 years running, 10 years hiding, 10 years of careful lies to survive. No more. You want my essence? She stood straighter, her form blazing brighter despite her injury. Then take it. She walked toward her mother, each step leaving moonflowers blooming in her wake. But as she moved, she began to speak in the old tongue, not to her mother, but to the manor itself, to the steel in its walls, to the ancient wards that had protected generations of Blackwoods. The steel wards responded to Aria's call. Ancient protections built into Blackwood Manor's foundation suddenly revealed their dual nature, designed centuries ago by Blackwood ancestors who understood the old powers not just to repel, but to contain. They awakened at an ethereal's command, forming a cage of pure intention that surrounded both Aria and her mother. What are you doing? Her mother snarled as steel-laced energy crackled through the air, making both ethereals flinch in pain. Something I should have done 10 years ago. Aria replied, her form growing brighter, not with healthy light, but with the dangerous glow of a star about to supernova. Steel doesn't just hurt us, Mother. In high enough concentration, it can force us back to our pure state. Formless, powerless essence without consciousness. You'll destroy yourself too. Yes. Aria's voice held perfect calm, but at least I'll take you with me. The wards strengthened, steel energy pressing inward like a vice. Her mother's shadow servants dissolved, unable to maintain form under such pressure. The corrupted ethereal herself began to flicker, her stolen power fighting against dissolution. You would die for him. Her mother gestured at Maxwell, who watched with desperate eyes, still fighting against the ancient command binding him. For a cursed mongrel who will live maybe 60 years, while you could exist for millennia. I've lived in fear for 10 years. I'd rather have one moment of love than another century of running. Aria began to dissolve at the edges, her form unraveling into pure light. The moonflowers throughout the hallway bloomed brighter, feeding on her dispersing essence. That's when Maxwell broke free, not through strength or his cursed form, but through something simpler, the mate bond. Aria's impending dissolution sent agony through their connection, and his wolf responded with primal fury that shattered her mother's weakening control. He crashed to the floor and immediately lunged not at her mother, but at Aria, wrapping his arms around her dissolving form. Stop, he commanded, not as an alpha, but as her mate. You don't get to leave me. The wards can be transformed. He pressed his forehead to hers, and she felt it, his wolf, his curse, the monstrous thing inside him, reaching out through their connection. You're not the only one who can sacrifice, little star. He smiled, and it was beautiful and terrible. My curse for your freedom. She felt his intention through their bond, and horror flooded her. No, you can't. The first wolf's essence is older than your mother's corruption, older than steel wards. If I release it fully, it will change everything. Not destroying, but transforming. I won't let you. Then we do it together. His gold-flecked eyes blazed with certainty. Your light, my darkness, creation and destruction. Balance, her mother screamed, realizing what they intended. She threw herself at them, no longer beautiful, but monstrous, all pretense of ethereal grace gone in her desperation. Aria looked into Maxwell's eyes and saw eternity. Together, she agreed. They released everything simultaneously. Aria's ethereal essence exploded outward in waves of pure creation light that gave rather than took, healing rather than destroying. The moonflowers that had been spreading throughout Blackwood Falls for months suddenly bloomed everywhere, in every crack and crevice where her essence had touched. Maxwell's curse erupted in response. Darkness devoured darkness as the primordial hunger of the first wolf was unleashed without restraint. The ancient power tore through her mother's shadowy servants, consuming them like wildfire through dry brush. Where light met darkness, impossible things happened. The steel wards didn't break, but transformed, becoming silver, then gold, then something that had no name because it had never existed before. Her mother's corrupted form, caught between creation and destruction, began to unravel. "This is impossible," she shrieked as her form dissolved. "Ethereals and wolves are opposite forces. You cannot combine them." "We're not opposites," Aria said, her voice harmonizing with Maxwell's growl. "We're balance." The explosion of power should have destroyed them all. Should have leveled Blackwood Manor, shattered the mountains, rewritten the laws of nature itself. Instead, it reformed everything. Valeria's essence, the corrupted ethereal who had once been Aria's mother, purified of darkness, dispersed into the cosmic flow. The twisted hunger that had driven her finally ended. The steel wards throughout the manor transformed into something new, neither keeping magic out nor trapping it in, but channeling it, balancing it, making it part of the world's fabric again. At the center of the transformation, Aria and Maxwell collapsed into each other, forever changed. Aria remained ethereal, but no longer purely so. Threads of shadow wove through her silver light, Maxwell's essence permanently entwined with hers. She could hold human form without effort, now the wolf curse stabilizing what had always been fluid. Maxwell remained cursed, but differently. The first wolf no longer fought against his human side, but merged with it. His eyes held permanent flecks of gold among the amber, and shadows bent strangely around him. They were neither fully their original selves nor completely transformed, but something new, something balanced. Dawnlight crept through the shattered windows. Impossible gardens bloomed in the hallway, moonflowers and shadow roses growing side by side in the wreckage. Plants that shouldn't exist thriving together, feeding on the new energy that radiated from the transformed wards. Footsteps pounded in the corridor. Maxwell's security team burst in, weapons drawn only to freeze at the sight before them, their colonel holding a being of living starlight amid a garden of impossible flora. Frank Carson, Maxwell's head of security and longtime family friend since their shared service in Vietnam, lowered his weapon first. "Jesus Christ, Max, what the hell happened here?" Before Maxwell could answer, more footsteps approached. Eleanor Reed appeared, escorted by two guards but no longer restrained. Her steel necklace rattled with each step, the crystallized ethereal essence suddenly blazing with warm light rather than cold imprisonment. "The convergence," she whispered, eyes wide as she took in the transformed hallway. It wasn't a metaphor. It was prophecy. Maxwell rose to his feet, still cradling Aria's weakened form. "Carson, secure the manor. All non-essential personnel evacuate to the East Wing. Dr. Reed," his eyes narrowed, "we need to talk." "Yes," Reed agreed, her imperious demeanor replaced by something approaching awe. "I believe we do." The library of Blackwood Manor had stood witness to centuries of history. Leather-bound tomes dating back to the American Revolution lined walls of polished oak. Battle maps from every American conflict hung beside family portraits of stern-faced Blackwoods in military uniforms spanning 2 centuries. Now it witnessed something entirely new. Maxwell sat behind his grandfather's desk, looking every inch the commander, despite his torn clothing and the gold flecks now permanent in his eyes. Aria stood beside him, her ethereal nature partially concealed, but still visible in the silver shimmer of her skin and the starlight quality of her hair. Across from them sat Dr. Reed, her scientific demeanor crumbling as she stared at the evidence before her eyes. "I've spent 30 years studying ethereal phenomena, cataloging their abilities, tracking their extinction." She touched her pendant, still glowing with newfound warmth. "I never imagined they could merge with other beings." "You've been hunting my kind for decades," Aria said, voice tinged with righteous anger. "Capturing our essence in those abominable pendants. Using us like batteries for your technology." Reed flinched. The Emeritus Institute was founded after the Great Purge with a mandate to study and contain supernatural threats to America. "We believed ethereals were apex predators, using humanity as cattle." "Like my mother became," Aria acknowledged. "But that was corruption, not our natural state." Maxwell leaned forward. "You said convergence earlier. Explain." Reed hesitated, then removed her pendant, placing it on the desk between them. "There's an old text in our archives predating European settlement of North America. We believed it metaphorical nonsense written by native shamans, a prophecy about the convergence of magical bloodlines." She recited from memory. When silver blood and shadow heart unite, the veil between worlds will lift. What was divided shall become whole. Silver blood. Aria touched her wrist where silver now ran visibly beneath translucent skin. Shadowheart. Maxwell placed his hand over his chest where darkness still swirled beneath his human exterior. The prophecy continues. Reed said, "When the children of light and darkness shall inherit the earth, bringing balance where there was war." She gestured to the window where moonflowers now bloomed improbably in daylight. "I believe what happened here was only the beginning." The doors opened and Frank Carson entered with a tablet displaying security footage. "Colonel, we've got a situation in town. You need to see this." The tablet showed Blackwood Falls Main Street. Children with silver-flecked eyes stood in a perfect circle in the town square, their hands raised toward the sky where strange lights danced. Shadows moved independently of their casters, forming protective shapes around the children. "It's happening everywhere," Frank said grimly. "Every kid who's shown symptoms in the past year suddenly developed full manifestations about an hour ago, right when that light show happened here." Maxwell exchanged glances with Aria. "They're responding to the energy release. Your essence has been seeding itself into the community for years, affecting the children most strongly because they're still developing." "We need to contain this," Reed started. "The Institute has protocols for—" "No." Maxwell's voice carried the weight of absolute command. "No more containment. No more hunting. This isn't a problem to solve, Doctor. It's evolution." "Evolution," Reed scoffed. "Colonel, with all due respect, we're talking about potentially dozens of children manifesting supernatural abilities. The panic alone could be managed," he interrupted, "if approached correctly." Aria placed her hand on the desk, and a small moonflower bloomed beneath her palm. "These children aren't dangerous. They're simply becoming what they were always meant to be: bridges between worlds." "The world isn't ready for this," Reed insisted. "The world is never ready for change," Maxwell countered. "That doesn't stop it from happening." The security tablet chimed with an incoming video call. Frank answered it, revealing Jackson Moore, Maxwell's former SEAL teammate and current second-in-command. Colonel Moore's voice was tight with controlled urgency. "We've got incoming. Emeritus Institute tactical units, at least 3 helicopters, and a convoy approaching from the south. ETA 20 minutes. Reed paled. "I didn't call for tactical support." "But someone at the Institute did," Maxwell stated flatly. "Someone who monitors your operations and doesn't share your sudden change of heart." He stood military training, taking over. "Carson, initiate protocol Shadowfall, full perimeter lockdown. Moore, get the townspeople into the community shelter beneath the church. Priority evacuation for all children showing manifestations." "Sir." Both men acknowledged simultaneously. Maxwell turned to Aria. "We need to move the children somewhere safe. Can you communicate with them through your connection?" She nodded, eyes already distant, as she reached out through the ethereal network forming among the affected children. "They feel me. They're afraid, but receptive. Guide them to the North Woods entrance of the Underground Railroad tunnels. Carson will meet them there." Maxwell turned to Reed. "Doctor, you have a choice to make, with us or with the Institute tactical teams." Reed looked down at her pendant, still glowing with warm light, rather than the cold imprisonment of before. Something had changed within the captured essence when Aria and Maxwell merged their powers. "The Institute I joined was meant to protect humanity, not persecute evolution," she said finally. "I'll help you, Colonel, but you should know who we're facing." She pulled up an image on her tablet, a stern-faced man with military bearing and cold eyes. Director Richard Wagner, former CIA Black Operations. He believes all supernatural entities are national security threats to be weaponized or neutralized. "Wagner," Maxwell growled the name. "I know him. Afghanistan 2017. He ran a classified program trying to create super soldiers using captured Taliban fighters as test subjects." "He's been running the Institute's tactical division for 5 years, Reed explained, "after your father denied him access to Blackwood land for a training facility that would have actually been a supernatural containment center." Maxwell's expression darkened. "My father died 3 months later." "Poisoned," Aria said softly. "You told me. Now I wonder by whom." Maxwell checked his watch. 15 minutes until they breach our perimeter. Dr. Reed, I need everything you know about Institute tactical capabilities and weaknesses. They use steel core ammunition UV strobes that can temporarily blind ethereal touched beings and sonic weapons tuned to disrupt supernatural energy signatures. Reed removed her earpiece and smashed it under her heel. And they monitor all Institute communications. Then we do this the old-fashioned, well, Maxwell decided. Aria, get to the children. I'll coordinate our defense. No, she stepped closer, silver light intensifying around her. We do this together. The moment we separated our powers, my mother nearly defeated us, remember? The gold in his eyes flared in response. Together, then. Frank cleared his throat. Colonel, permission to mobilize the Blackwood veterans. Maxwell nodded grimly. Full tactical response. Weapons free but non-lethal protocols where possible. These are still Americans, even if they're following misguided orders. Frank hurried out, already speaking rapid-fire instructions into his radio. Maxwell opened a concealed panel behind a bookshelf, revealing an arsenal of weapons and tactical gear. Your private army, Colonel? Reed asked, eyebrow raised. Former Special Forces operators who've worked with the Blackwood family for generations. He corrected, strapping on body armor. Men who know the truth about what we protect. He tossed her a bulletproof vest. Make yourself useful, Doctor. Those are your people coming to attack American citizens on private property. As he armed himself with practiced efficiency, Maxwell explained to Aria, my great-grandfather established the Blackwood veterans during World War II. Former soldiers who showed sensitivity to supernatural occurrences. Most discovered their abilities in combat situations. Men who'd seen things they couldn't explain, Reed murmured. The Institute has files on similar phenomena, soldiers who developed heightened senses or intuition after prolonged combat exposure. The thin places between worlds open widest during moments of extreme stress, Aria said, watching Maxwell check a massive custom-built sidearm. Your human war zones create perfect conditions for crossing, which explains why Blackwood men have traditionally served in every American conflict. Maxwell slid extra magazines into his tactical vest. We're drawn to those thin places. The wolf inside us senses opportunity. The Manor security system chimed a warning. Perimeter breach south sector, an automated voice announced. Multiple vehicles and aerial units detected. Maxwell strode to the window. 3 black helicopters circled the estate while armored vehicles pushed through the main gates. Men in tactical gear poured out, taking cover positions with practiced precision. Wagner isn't messing around, he observed grimly. That's a Delta-level response team. For children, Aria whispered, horror evident in her voice. Not just children, Reed corrected. You, the last full ethereal. Wagner has been hunting you for years using my research to track energy signatures. He believes harnessing ethereal energy could create weapons beyond anything we've developed. Maxwell's radio crackled. Colonel, came Frank's voice, we've secured 27 children with manifestations in the North Tunnel. More reports Institute forces have surrounded the town. They're conducting house-to-house searches. Martial law without authorization, Maxwell growled, on American soil. Wagner always believes the ends justify the means, Reed said. He'll claim national security emergency protocols. Maxwell made his decision. Aria, get to the tunnels. Help the children control their manifestations. Carson will guide you through the old escape route to the mountain shelter. And you, She reached for him, silver light intertwining with the shadows that now permanently emanated from his skin. I'll deal with Wagner. Not alone, she insisted. We established that separating is dangerous. I'm not separating from you. He took her hand and power surged between them, light and shadow dancing where they touched. Part of me stays with you now. Remember, just as part of you stays with me. She nodded, understanding. Since their merge, a connection remained between them, a permanent bridge between their essences. They'll hit the manor first, Maxwell continued. Wagner will expect me to be here defending the family seat. Instead, I'll slip out through the eastern tunnel and circle behind their lines, divide their forces. Classic pincer movement, Reed observed. An old strategy, but effective. Maxwell checked his radio frequencies. Carson's team will create a distraction at the main entrance, while Moore's unit secures the town. I'll handle Wagner personally. Wagner believes all supernaturals should be controlled or eliminated, Reed warned. But what happened here today, this convergence, it changes everything we thought we knew about ethereal energy. Which is exactly why he can't be allowed to capture any of these children, Maxwell replied. Or Aria. A thunderous explosion shook the manor as the first assault began. Maxwell didn't flinch, years of combat experience steadying his hands as he finished his preparations. 30 seconds, then move to the eastern passage, he instructed Reed and Aria. I'll draw their attention to the western wing. Colonel Reed said hesitantly, if Wagner discovers what's happened to you, the convergence with ethereal energy, he'll never stop hunting you. Let him try. The gold in Maxwell's eyes flared brighter. The Blackwood family has been fighting to protect this land since the Revolutionary War. Wagner isn't the first threat we've faced, and he won't be the last. With that, he moved to the door, pausing only briefly to look back at Aria. Their eyes met in silent communication, their bond humming with shared power and purpose. Stay alive, she whispered. Always do, he answered with the confidence of a soldier who had survived 100 battles. Then he was gone, moving like a shadow through his ancestral home toward the sound of invasion. The tunnels beneath Blackwood Falls dated back to the Underground Railroad. Generations of Blackwoods had expanded the network over centuries, creating a subterranean maze known only to family and their most trusted allies. Aria moved through the dim passages, her natural light illuminating rough-hewn walls reinforced with modern support beams. Behind her followed Reed, now an uncertain ally in their struggle against her former colleagues. These tunnels don't appear on any Institute maps, Reed marveled. We had no idea this network existed. The Blackwoods have always understood the value of secrets, Aria replied, just as they understood that some things must be protected rather than exploited. They turned a corner, and the tunnel opened into a larger chamber where Frank Carson waited with the affected children. 27 young faces turned toward Aria, their eyes all showing varying degrees of silver flecks among their natural colors. Some of the older children had developed more pronounced manifestations, faintly glowing skin shadows that moved independently, small moonflowers blooming in their footprints. Miss Anne, one small girl said, using the name Aria had gone by in town. You're all sparkly now. Yes, Emma, I am. Aria knelt before the child, letting her ethereal nature show more fully. And so are you in your own way. Are we in danger? Asked a teenage boy, his hands wrapped in shadows that hadn't been there a day ago. Those men with guns came to our house. My dad tried to stop them, but they... His voice broke. They took your parents for questioning, Frank finished grimly. Wagner's men have detained anyone related to children showing signs of the convergence. Hostages, Reed said quietly. Wagner will use them as leverage. Aria looked at the frightened faces surrounding her. These children had done nothing wrong except exist at a moment of evolutionary change. They didn't deserve to become pawns in Wagner's power games or test subjects for his weapons programs. The change happening inside you is natural, she told them, infusing her voice with calm certainty. It's been coming for generations. You're not becoming monsters. You're becoming bridges between worlds that have been separated too long. But we can't control it, the teenage boy said, shadows flickering around his fingers. I nearly hurt my little sister when these things first appeared. I can help you learn control, Aria promised. That's why we're here. She looked at Frank. How secure is this location? Reasonably, he answered, but we can't stay indefinitely. The Institute has thermal imaging technology that might eventually detect this many bodies clustered underground. We need to move them to the mountain shelter, Reed suggested. The old mining tunnels were reinforced with steel during the Cold War. If they've transformed like the wards at the manor, they might actually amplify the children's abilities rather than dampen them. Frank nodded. That's the plan. But we need to coordinate with the colonel first, make sure our path is clear. As if summoned by the mention, Maxwell's voice came through Frank's radio. Carson status report. Frank keyed his mic. All packages secured at Checkpoint Alpha. Ready for Phase 2 on your mark. Negative, Maxwell replied, his voice tight with suppressed urgency. Wagner has deployed a new weapon, some kind of ethereal detection grid. Any significant manifestation will trigger their sensors. Aria felt cold fear spread through her. The children can't hide their energy yet. They haven't learned control. Exactly the problem, Maxwell confirmed. Moore's team is pinned down in the town center. Wagner's using civilian hostages as shields. We need a new strategy. What about the convergence? Aria asked suddenly. If these steel-lined tunnels have transformed like the wards at the manor, Could they mask our energy signatures rather than amplify them? There was a moment of silence before Reed spoke up. That's actually possible. The transformed steel might create a dampening field instead of a containment one. Test it, Maxwell ordered. Aria placed her palm against the tunnel wall, reaching out with her senses. Where once the steel reinforcements would have burned her ethereal form, they now responded differently, absorbing her energy, cycling it, redirecting it through the structure itself. It's working, she reported. The steel is channeling the energy, dispersing it harmlessly throughout the system. That gives us an option, Maxwell said. Carson, proceed to the mountain shelter through the eastern passage. I'll create a diversion at the manor to draw Wagner's forces away from your route. What kind of diversion? Frank asked. The kind they won't ignore, Maxwell answered cryptically. Move out in 5 minutes. Blackwood actual out. Frank immediately began organizing the children into travel groups, pairing the younger ones with teenagers who could help guide them. Aria assisted, using her ethereal energy to calm the most frightened children. De Ridder approached her privately. There's something you should know about Wagner. What? He doesn't just want to contain ethereal energy. He believes it can be weaponized on a scale we've never seen before. Reed looked haunted. My research indicated that pure ethereal essence, if properly harnessed, could theoretically affect quantum fields. Meaning what exactly? Aria asked, though she feared she already knew. Meaning he could potentially destabilize the fundamental forces holding matter together. Reed's voice dropped to a whisper. Wagner doesn't just want weapons. He wants the power to unmake reality if necessary. And he thinks I'm the key to that power, Aria realized. The last full ethereal. You and now these children, Reed confirmed, and possibly Colonel Blackwood if Wagner discovers your convergence. Aria stared at the children preparing for evacuation, their newly manifested abilities flickering around them like birthday candles, beautiful, innocent, and utterly vulnerable. We need to move, Frank called. Eastern Passage, single file. Older kids watch the younger ones. Nobody gets left behind. As they began filing toward the tunnel mouth, the ground above them trembled with distant explosions. That's the Colonel's diversion, Frank said grimly. Aria reached out through her connection to Maxwell and feeling the sudden surge of power as he released his transformed nature. The first wolf, now merged with ethereal energy, was hunting. Above ground, Maxwell Blackwood stalked across the battlefield his ancestral home had become. Institute tactical teams had breached the manor's outer defenses, deploying in textbook military formation around the main building. He moved like shadow-given form, his special forces training enhanced by preternatural speed and senses. 3 operatives went down before they registered his presence, precision strikes to non-lethal points, just enough force to incapacitate without killing. Maxwell had no quarrel with soldiers following orders. His target was the man who gave those orders. Director Richard Wagner stood behind the tactical line, monitoring the assault from an armored command vehicle. Tall and gaunt, with steel-gray hair cut to military precision, he projected the cold authority of a man accustomed to absolute control. Team Alpha breached the East Wing, Wagner instructed, through his communication system. Gamma Team, deploy the E-suppressors around the perimeter. I want every ethereal signature contained. A subordinate approached, hesitation evident in his posture. Sir, we're picking up unusual readings from the manor. The energy signatures don't match to any known ethereal patterns. Explain, Wagner demanded. It's as if the ethereal energy has merged with something else, something we haven't cataloged before. Wagner's eyes narrowed. The Blackwood bloodline. I always suspected they weren't entirely human. A thin smile crossed his face. This changes the parameters. Deploy the Alpha-class containment protocols as well. Sir, those protocols haven't been field-tested. The potential collateral damage to civilians is acceptable given the threat level, Wagner finished coldly. Execute my orders. The subordinate saluted and departed, leaving Wagner alone in the command center, surrounded by monitoring equipment, tracking energy signatures across the Blackwood estate. He never sensed the shadow detaching itself from the vehicle's dark interior. Hello, Richard. Wagner spun around, reaching for his sidearm, only to find his arm caught in an iron grip. Colonel Maxwell Blackwood stood before him, eyes blazing gold, in a face that remained eerily calm. Blackwood, Wagner managed composure, slipping only slightly. You're interfering with a national security operation. No, Maxwell corrected. I'm preventing an illegal assault on American citizens, on my family's land. Wagner's eyes narrowed, taking in the subtle changes to Maxwell's appearance. The gold flecks in his eyes, the way shadows seemed to cling to him unnaturally. You've been compromised, Wagner concluded. The ethereal has affected you somehow. Not compromised, evolved. Maxwell released Wagner's arm but blocked the only exit. Call off your men, Richard. The children aren't a threat. Children, Wagner laughed without humor. Is that what you think they are? They're biological weapons waiting to happen, walking security breaches. The beginning of the end of human dominance on this planet. They're American citizens with constitutional rights, Maxwell countered. Not to mention children of your own men. Did you think about that before ordering this assault? How many of your operatives have kids in Blackwood Falls? A flicker of uncertainty crossed Wagner's face before his resolve hardened. Sacrifices must be made for the greater good. You understand that concept, Colonel. You've made those calls in combat. Against enemy combatants, yes, not against our own children. Maxwell's voice dropped dangerously. This ends now, Wagner. You're going to order your men to stand down and release all civilian hostages. Wagner studied him, calculating. And if I refuse, the shadows around Maxwell deepened, coalescing into something almost solid. The temperature in the command center dropped noticeably. Then you'll learn firsthand why the Blackwood family has guarded these secrets for centuries. Golden light flickered behind Maxwell's eyes. Why we were feared long before America existed. Wagner reached slowly for the console behind him. Impressive intimidation tactics, Colonel, but I have one advantage you've overlooked. His finger pressed a button, and suddenly the air was filled with a high-pitched whine. Maxwell staggered, the sound somehow interfering with his transformed nature, setting every nerve ending on fire. Sonic disruptor, Wagner explained calmly, drawing at his sidearm. Tuned specifically to affect supernatural neural pathways, one of many countermeasures we've developed. Maxwell fought through the pain, forcing his body to adapt as the first wolf and ethereal energies within him battled the external assault. You've been planning this for years. Since your father denied me access to Blackwood land. Wagner checked the specialized ammunition in his weapon. He discovered our true purpose and threatened to expose the Institute. Unfortunately for him, heart attacks are so common in men his age. The confirmation of his suspicions gave Maxwell new strength. You murdered my father. I neutralized a threat to national security, Wagner corrected, just as I'm about to neutralize you. He raised his weapon, aiming center mass at Maxwell's chest. The ethereal female and the children will be taken alive for study. You, however, are too dangerous to contain. Maxwell's enhanced senses detected the subtle change in air pressure as Wagner's finger tightened on the trigger. Time seemed to slow as the first wolf's instincts merged with his Delta Force training. Before Wagner could fire, Maxwell moved not away from the weapon but toward it. His hand closed around the barrel, forcing it upward as the shot discharged harmlessly into the ceiling. His other hand struck Wagner's wrist with precision, breaking his grip on the firearm. Wagner reacted with surprising speed for a man his age, launching a counterattack that revealed specialized combat training. A vicious knee strike was followed by an elbow to Maxwell's temple that would have incapacitated a normal human. But Maxwell was no longer entirely human. He absorbed the blow, allowing the first wolf's durability to protect him while maintaining enough control to avoid killing Wagner in retaliation. This was still an American military official, misguided as he might be. Stand down, Wagner, Maxwell ordered, blocking another strike. You can't win this fight. I don't need to win, Wagner smiled coldly. I just need to delay you. Too late, Maxwell realized the true purpose of this confrontation. Wagner had never expected to defeat him personally. He was creating a diversion while his forces pursued their real objectives. Aria and the children. Maxwell's momentary distraction cost him. Wagner activated another sonic device, this one small enough to fit in his palm, but powerful enough to drive Maxwell to his knees. The disruptive frequency attacked the merged energies within him, forcing the separation of wolf and ethereal essences that had become intertwined. Fascinating, Wagner observed dispassionately. Your biology has actually bonded with the ethereal energy at a cellular level. The research potential is remarkable. Through the haze of pain, Maxwell reached for his radio. Carson, trap, abort mission. Wagner knocked the radio away. Your people can't hear you, Colonel. We're jamming all unauthorized communications. He keyed his own comms unit. All units converge on the eastern tunnels. I want those children secured immediately. Deploy E-suppressors at all tunnel exits. Maxwell fought through the debilitating sonic assault, reaching deep within himself, where the first wolf and Aria's ethereal energy had merged. Their union had created something new, something Wagner's technology wasn't designed to counter. Instead of fighting the separation, he embraced it, allowing the energies to fully diverge within him before snapping back together like a rubber band stretched and released. The resulting energy pulse shorted out Wagner's sonic device in a shower of sparks. Wagner stumbled back, genuine fear crossing his features for the first time. What are you? Maxwell rose to his full height, eyes now blazing, solid gold shadows coalescing around him like living armor. I am what you most fear, Richard. The future you can't control. Outside gunfire and explosions intensified as the Blackwood veterans engaged Institute forces. Maxwell could sense the battle, turning his men using their superior knowledge of the terrain to outmaneuver Wagner's tactical teams. But the children remained vulnerable. Without direct communication, Frank wouldn't know about Wagner's trap. Maxwell needed to reach Aria, not through technology but through the bond they now shared. He closed his eyes, focusing on the connection that stretched between them like a golden thread. Their partial merger had created a psychic link, tenuous but real. If he could just reach her, Aria. Miles away, deep in the eastern tunnels, Aria staggered mid-step. The children around her stopped, sensing the disturbance in her energy field. Miss Anne, Emma asked worriedly, are you okay? Aria focused inward, feeling Maxwell's presence through their bond. Danger, trap, eastern exit compromised. We need to change course, she announced urgently. Frank, the eastern exit is a trap. They're waiting for us. Frank frowned. How do you know? Maxwell told me. She touched her chest where the bond pulsed strongest. We're connected now. He's fighting Wagner, but he managed to warn us. Reed stepped forward. There's another option, the northern mining shaft. It was abandoned in the 1950s when the silver deposits ran out. The Institute doesn't have it on any maps. It's unstable, Frank objected. That's why we sealed it 20 years ago. It's our only option, Aria insisted. I can sense Wagner's men closing in on the eastern exit. They have some kind of ethereal suppression technology. Frank considered for only a moment before making his decision. Northern route it is. Everyone stay close. The tunnels get narrow and rough from here on. As they changed direction, Reed fell into step beside Aria. The bond between you and the Colonel, that's unprecedented. No documented case exists of ethereals forming psychic connections with other species. Because we've stopped being separate species, Aria explained. The convergence changed us both at a fundamental level. We're something new now. And these children, Aria looked at the young faces surrounding them, each showing varying degrees of transformation as ethereal energy merged with their human biology. They're the first generation of whatever comes next, neither fully human nor fully ethereal, but a perfect balance of both. Wagner will never accept that, Reed warned. He believes humanity must remain dominant, with all other species either controlled or eliminated. Then Wagner stands against evolution itself, Aria replied, a battle no one has ever won. They reached a junction where the maintained tunnels intersected with a rougher passage, its entrance partially collapsed and marked with faded warning signs. Northern shaft, Frank confirmed. Everyone stick together. The supports are old and some sections might be flooded. Aria moved to the front, her natural light illuminating the dark passage. I'll lead. My light should make navigation easier. As they entered the abandoned mine shaft, the quality of the air changed, becoming damper, heavier with mineral scents and the musty odor of decades without human presence. Behind them, distant sounds of pursuit echoed through the tunnels, boots on stone, voices calling out positions, the metallic clicks of weapons being readied. They found our trail, Frank said grimly. Move faster, but stay quiet. The children hurried forward, the older ones helping younger children over rough patches and fallen debris. Aria marveled at their resilience. Hours ago, most had been ordinary kids with ordinary lives. Now they were refugees, fleeing armed forces, their bodies transformed by energies they didn't understand. Yet they showed remarkable adaptation, already instinctively using their new abilities. One teenage girl created small balls of silver light to mark the path. A young boy's shadow stretched ahead, seeming to test the tunnel's stability before they passed. They're learning so quickly, Reed observed with scientific fascination. Necessity accelerates evolution, Aria replied. They're adapting because they must. The tunnel narrowed further, forcing them into single file. Water dripped from the ceiling, forming puddles that reflected their passing like liquid mirrors. The air grew colder, indicating they were moving deeper beneath the mountain. Frank checked a weathered map by flashlight. Half-mile more to the northern exit. It emerges in a box canyon that should provide cover while we make for the mountain shelter. Aria suddenly froze her ethereal senses, detecting something ahead. Wait, something's wrong. What is it? Frank asked, signaling the others to halt. I'm not sure. The energy patterns ahead feel distorted. Reed pushed forward to join them. Institute technology, some kind of trap. Aria shook her head. No, it's not artificial. It's like a tear in reality itself. She cautiously advanced the silver light emanating from her skin, revealing a section of tunnel where the air itself seemed to shimmer and twist, as if reality had become thin and fragile. The convergence, Reed breathed. It's affecting more than just people. It's changing the fundamental structure of reality where ethereal energy has been present. Is it dangerous? Frank demanded practically. Aria reached out with her senses, testing the distortion. Not dangerous exactly, more like a door. A door to where, I don't know, but I can feel something on the other side, something familiar. Aria extended her hand toward the shimmering distortion, like an echo of ethereal energy. Reed grabbed her wrist. Wait, you don't know what that could do. She's right, Frank agreed. We can't take risks with the children behind us. Aria reluctantly withdrew her hand in. We'll go around it. There must be another route to the northern exit. Frank consulted his map again. There's a maintenance passage about 50 yards back. Might be tight, but it should reconnect with the main shaft beyond this section. As they turned to retrace their steps, a thunderous explosion shook the tunnel, sending dust and small rocks showering down around them. The children cried out in fear, huddling together instinctively. Institute forces breaching the tunnels, Frank announced, checking his weapon. They're blasting their way in. Another explosion closer this time. The tunnel supports groaned ominously. These old sections won't withstand much more, Reed warned. The whole system could collapse. Frank made a rapid decision. New plan. Dr. Reed, take the children through the maintenance passage. I'll stay here and buy you time. Against Institute tactical teams, Reed objected. That's suicide. Just doing my job, ma'am. Frank checked his ammunition with practiced efficiency. Been fighting since Vietnam. Few more won't make a difference. No, Aria stepped forward. There's another way. She turned toward the reality distortion, the shimmering doorway in space. I can feel what's on the other side now. It's another section of the tunnels, but different, as if the convergence created a shortcut through space itself. A wormhole, Reed suggested, theoretically possible if ethereal energy affects quantum fields. We don't have time for theories, Frank interrupted as another explosion rocked the tunnel. Are you sure it's safe, miss? Aria studied the distortion, reaching out with her ethereal senses. Not completely sure, but I believe it leads to safety. I can feel Maxwell, somehow, on the other side. Frank considered for only a moment. Good enough for me. Kids first, then Dr. Reed. Wait, Reed protested. We have no empirical evidence that science takes a back seat to survival, doctor. Frank cut her off. Move now or stay behind with me. Aria approached the shimmering distortion, extending her hands toward it. The air rippled like water as her fingers passed through, causing no apparent harm. Taking a deep breath, she stepped fully into the distortion. For one disorienting moment, she existed everywhere and nowhere, her ethereal nature expanding beyond physical limitations, touching countless realities simultaneously. Then just as quickly, she solidified on the other side. She found herself in another tunnel, similar but different, the walls lined with the transformed steel she recognized from Blackwood Manor. a tunnel that hummed with balanced energy rather than suppressing or amplifying it. "It's safe," she called back through the portal. "Send the children through." One by one, the children passed through the reality distortion, each experiencing a moment of transformation as their newly evolved natures interfaced with the quantum boundary. Frank ushered them forward efficiently, positioning himself as the last defender should Institute forces breach their position before evacuation completed. As the final child stepped through, Ian hesitated at the threshold, scientific curiosity battling with survival instinct. "This shouldn't be possible," she murmured, fingers probing the shimmering boundary. "It violates every known law of physics." "The old laws are changing, Doctor," Aria replied from the other side. "That's what evolution means." Another explosion much closer made the decision for her. Reed leapt through the portal, gasping as the transition momentarily separated her consciousness from her body. Frank came last, backing through the portal with his weapon trained on the tunnel behind him. As he emerged, the reality distortion began to flicker and contract. "It's closing," Aria observed. The passage was temporary. The portal shrank rapidly at the last glimpse through it, revealing Institute tactical teams rounding the corner of the tunnel they just vacated. A final contraction, and the distortion disappeared entirely, leaving solid rock wall where it had been. "Perfect timing," Frank remarked dryly. "Now where exactly are we?" Aria examined their surroundings. "Still underground, but different. The energy signature feels like Blackwood Manor after the transformation. Protected." Reed ran her hands along the tunnel walls where veins of what had once been steel now glowed with a subtle golden luminescence. "The convergence has affected the entire tunnel network, transformed it." "But where does it lead?" Frank asked pragmatically. As if in answer, a voice echoed from further down the passage. "Aria children." Maxwell Blackwood emerged from the darkness, his eyes glowing golden in the dim light, shadows clinging to him like a living cloak. Despite evidence of recent combat-torn clothing, a gash across his forehead that was already healing, he moved with confident strength. "Maxwell." Aria rushed forward, silver light streaming from her form as they embraced. Where they touched, their energies visibly merged shadow and light, creating something new and beautiful. "You found the passage," he said, wonder evident in his voice. "I felt you coming, through our bond." "The convergence created it," she explained, "a doorway through reality itself." Maxwell looked past her to the children, his expression softening. "They all made it." Frank stepped forward, offering a military salute that Maxwell returned. "Wagner's forces." "Contained," Maxwell replied. "The Blackwood veterans have secured the perimeter. Wagner himself is detained." "Is it over?" Reed asked cautiously. "No." Maxwell's expression turned grave. "This was just the first battle. Wagner has connections throughout the government. The Institute has facilities nationwide. And we still have 27 transformed children who need protection and training." "Not just 27, Aria corrected. "If my essence has been seeding itself into Blackwood Falls for years, there will be more manifestations. Everywhere I've been during the past decade." Maxwell nodded in understanding. "Then we build a sanctuary, a place where they can learn to control their abilities without fear." "Blackwood Mountain," Frank suggested. "The old Cold War bunkers could be converted, with the transformed steel actually helping rather than hindering their development." Reed added scientific mind, already calculating possibilities. Maxwell looked at the gathered children, their eyes reflecting various stages of the convergence with silver flecks among natural colors. Then to Aria, whose ethereal nature now permanently intertwined with his first wolf essence. "A new beginning," he said softly, "for all of us." The mountain had protected the Blackwood family for generations. Now it would protect the first children of convergence, neither fully human nor fully ethereal, but the perfect balance of both. The future none of them could have imagined 24 hours earlier. Wagner and his institute had sought to control or destroy what they didn't understand. But evolution couldn't be stopped, only guided. The children would need that guidance to navigate their transformed nature in a world that might fear them. Maxwell took Aria's hand, feeling the perfect harmony of their merged energies. Together they had created something unprecedented, a bridge between worlds long separated. And in these children, that bridge would become a new path forward. "Welcome home," he told them all, "to Blackwood Sanctuary." 3 months transformed Blackwood Mountain beyond recognition. What had once been a Cold War military installation became a sanctuary, a school and a fortress all at once. Maxwell Blackwood stood on the observation deck carved into the mountainside, watching the sunset paint the Oregon landscape in hues of gold and crimson. His enhanced vision could pick out the distant lights of Blackwood Falls, now under the protection of more security teams. Closer, the newly constructed training fields, where children learn to control their evolving abilities. Thinking about Wagner, Frank Carson approached the old Vietnam veteran, moving with the quiet assurance that came from decades of surviving impossible situations. Among other things, Maxwell acknowledged, Wagner remained secured in the mountain's detention level, stripped of authority, but still dangerous for the knowledge he possessed. The Institute had gone silent after their failed operation, regrouping behind closed government doors, preparing their next move. Reed's team finished analyzing the data from the convergence event, Frank reported. Thought you'd want to know immediately. Maxwell turned from the view. And it's happening beyond Blackwood Falls. Children born within 50 miles of anywhere Aria live in during the past decade and are showing signs of the change. Silver eyes, moving shadows, some abilities manifesting after puberty. Numbers. Approximately 100 confirmed cases so far, likely more unidentified. Maxwell absorbed this information with outward calm, though inwardly the implications concerned him. Not merely the 27 children they'd initially rescued, but potentially hundreds more. Each one a potential target for the Institute and Valeria's former allies. Wagner claimed this was the end of human dominance, he said finally. I'm starting to understand his perspective, even if I disagree with his methods. Dominance isn't the same as existence, Frank countered. Species evolve, or they always have. A subtle shimmer of silver light announced Aria's arrival before she fully materialized. She appeared beside them, her ethereal form permanently altered by her merger with Maxwell's first wolf essence. Threads of shadow wove through her silver luminescence, creating a beautiful harmony of opposites. The children are ready, she announced. It's time. Maxwell nodded, his expression solemn. Today would determine whether their sanctuary became a permanent haven or merely a temporary shelter before catastrophe. Together they descended into the mountain complex, passing through corridors where transformed steel pulsed with subtle golden energy. Blackwood veterans saluted as they passed these hardened warriors, now dedicated to protecting the children who represented an evolutionary leap forward. The central chamber had once been a nuclear command center during the Cold War. Now it served as both classroom and council room for the sanctuary's growing population. Nearly 100 children of various ages filled the tiered seating, their eyes all showing silver flecks that caught the light. Some of the older ones had developed more pronounced manifestations, faintly glowing skin shadows that responded to their emotions, small displays of telekinetic ability. Reed stood at a monitoring station coordinating with a team of scientists who had defected from the Institute after witnessing the truth about the convergence. They had abandoned Wagner's vision of control and weaponization, choosing instead to help guide this new evolutionary path. Is everything prepared? Maxwell asked Reed. She nodded, though nervous tension showed in the tightness around her eyes. The communications satellite will broadcast globally for precisely 7 minutes, long enough to deliver our message, but not enough time for hostile agencies to pinpoint our location. And Wagner, secured but present as requested. Reed looked uncomfortable with this decision. I still don't understand why you want him to witness this. Because he needs to see the future he tried to prevent, Maxwell explained. He spent decades believing ethereals threatened humanity. He needs to understand that we're offering evolution, not extinction. The chamber doors opened and Wagner entered under heavy guard. The former Institute director remained defiant despite his captivity, his military bearing undiminished, his cold eyes assessing everything with calculating precision. Colonel Blackwood, Wagner acknowledged with formal correctness. Dr. Reed, or should I say traitor, to your species. Reed ignored the provocation, returning to her instruments. Wagner's gaze shifted to Aria, studying her transformed appearance with scientific detachment. Fascinating, he observed. The convergence has stabilized in you. Perfect integration of ethereal and lupine energies without degradation of either. My researchers believed such harmony was theoretically impossible. This isn't a laboratory demonstration, Wagner, Maxwell said sharply. You're here to witness a moment in history, not collect data. Wagner smiled thinly. History science, ultimately, they're both about observing change and drawing conclusions. I'm simply more honest about my intentions. Maxwell guided him to a designated observation area with clear visibility, but no access to controls or children. The guards remained at attention, weapons ready. 2 minutes to satellite uplink, Reed announced. Maxwell moved to the center of the chamber where Aria waited. The children fell silent, sensing the importance of what was about to happen. Even the youngest understood they were part of something momentous. What we do today changes everything. Maxwell addressed them all, his voice carrying the authority of both military commander and First Wolf Alpha. For generations, my family has guarded the secrets of the old world, the existence of ethereals, the curse of the first wolves, the balance between human and supernatural. He looked at their young faces, seeing not fear but anticipation. That secrecy ends today. The convergence has made hiding impossible. Our choice now is whether we control the narrative or let others define us as monsters. Aria stepped forward, her silver light brightening. Each of you carries both human and ethereal essence now. Not a curse or a mistake, but evolution's next step. You are bridges between worlds that have been separated too long. Satellites linked, Reed reported, broadcasting in 3, 2, 1. The chamber's central display activated, showing a live feed that would now be interrupting normal broadcasts worldwide. Maxwell and Aria stood side by side, physical manifestations of the convergence they represented. My name is Colonel Maxwell Blackwood, he began, looking directly into the camera. Former commander of Delta Force, descendant of a bloodline that has served America since the Revolutionary War. What I'm about to tell you will challenge everything you believe about human history and evolution. He gestured to Aria. This is Aria, last of the ethereal's beings who have lived alongside humanity since before recorded history. For centuries, our kinds have existed in separation, often in conflict. Aria continued seamlessly. 3 months ago, a convergence occurred, a merging of ethereal energy with human biology that has created something entirely new. Children across America are beginning to manifest abilities that seem impossible because they carry both ethereal and human essence. The camera panned to show the assembled children, their silver-flecked eyes and subtle manifestations visible for the world to see. These children are not dangerous, Maxwell assured. They are not a threat to humanity, but its natural evolution. They represent a future where the barriers between our worlds no longer exist. Wagner made a sound of disgust from his observation area. Propaganda. You're selling extinction as evolution. Maxwell ignored him, continuing his address. For generations, my family has protected these secrets. Now we offer protection to any child experiencing the convergence. Blackwood Sanctuary stands as a haven where these children can learn to control their abilities without fear or persecution. Aria extended her hands, creating a sphere of silver light between her palms. We choose to reveal ourselves now because hiding is no longer possible. The convergence spreads with each passing day. More children awaken to abilities they don't understand. We offer knowledge, Maxwell said. We offer safety. We offer truth. The camera returned to a two-shot of them together, light and shadow perfectly balanced between them. To those who would respond with fear or violence, know that these children are under our protection. To those experiencing the change, you are not alone. The future belongs to all of us together. Transmission complete, Reed announced as the feed cut off. Message delivered to approximately 2 billion viewers worldwide. A moment of profound silence filled the chamber as the weight of what they'd done settled over everyone present. Centuries of secrecy ended in 7 minutes of global broadcast. The supernatural world revealed not through panic or disaster, but through calm disclosure and invitation. Wagner broke the silence with slow, deliberate applause. Masterfully played, Colonel. A preemptive strike disguised as an olive branch. His eyes narrowed analytically. You've just made it impossible for any government to move openly against these children without seeming monstrous. That was the idea, Maxwell confirmed. But you've also guaranteed conflict, Wagner countered. Humanity won't simply accept evolutionary obsolescence. There will be resistance, religious, political, military. You've started a war. No, Aria corrected. We've prevented one by refusing to hide or be ashamed. These children will grow up in the light, not in shadows. Wagner studied the children with calculating intensity. And when they outnumber unaltered humans, when they begin to take positions of power, when they decide their abilities make them superior, they'll have us to guide them, Maxwell answered, to teach them responsibility and compassion alongside control. Noble sentiments. Wagner's smile held no warmth, but history suggests otherwise. Power corrupts, Colonel. Always. Only when it's seized through fear, Aria countered, not when it's accepted as natural evolution. Wagner shook his head, unconvinced. I wonder if you'll remember this conversation in 50 years when pure humans are museum exhibits. Take him back to detention. Maxwell ordered the guards, having heard enough. As Wagner was escorted out, Maxwell turned to Reed. Monitor global reactions. I want to know how the message is being received. Reed nodded, already scanning incoming data streams. Initial responses are mixed but trending positive. Religious organizations are split, some claiming divine intervention, others calling it demonic influence. Governments are issuing cautious statements urging calm while they investigate the situation. And the Institute, silent officially, but our contacts report intense activity. They're mobilizing resources, but discreetly. Your broadcast caught them unprepared. Maxwell processed this information with the strategic assessment of a veteran commander. We have a window then time before organized opposition can form, which we'll use to bring more children to safety, Aria added. Many will be frightened by their emerging abilities, especially after today's revelation. Agreed, Maxwell turned to Frank. Double the extraction teams. Prioritize children showing advanced manifestations or facing immediate threats. As the chamber emptied, the children returning to their classes and training sessions, Maxwell and Aria remained behind with Reed and Frank, the core leadership of what had become in 3 short months a movement rather than merely a sanctuary. Wagner's right about one thing, Frank noted grimly. There will be resistance, violent resistance. We're prepared for that, Maxwell assured him. The mountain defenses are fully operational, and most of the Blackwood veterans have combat experience against supernatural threats. It's not just about defense, Reed interjected, looking up from her monitors. We need public support, political allies. We need to make the convergence seem beneficial to humanity, not threatening. The children themselves will accomplish that, Aria said confidently. As they learn to control their abilities and use them constructively, fear will gradually transform into acceptance. Maxwell wasn't so certain. Humanity has a long history of fearing what it doesn't understand. The path forward won't be easy or peaceful. He moved to a tactical display showing Blackwood's sanctuary and the surrounding territory. For now, we focus on security and education. Every child we bring to safety is another bridge between worlds, another chance to shape this evolution responsibly. And what about you two? Reed asked, her scientific curiosity evident. The convergence within you continues to stabilize, creating abilities we've never documented before. Maxwell and Aria exchanged glances, silent communication flowing through their strengthened bond. The truth was neither fully understood the changes still occurring within them. Each day brought new discoveries, new capacities emerging from their merged essences. We're becoming what we need to be, Aria answered simply, guides for what comes next. The conversation was interrupted by an urgent alert from the perimeter sensors. Jackson Moore's voice came through the comm system. Colonel, we've got multiple aircraft approaching from the south. Military configurations, no transponders. Maxwell moved immediately to the command console. Identification. Unmarked, sir. Electronic signatures match Institute equipment, but on a scale we haven't seen before. At least 6 transport helicopters escorted by armed drones. Wagner's reinforcements, Reed concluded. The Institute must have had contingency plans in place. Time to intercept, Maxwell demanded. 12 minutes at current speed, Moore reported. They're not trying to hide their approach. Because they want us to see them coming, Frank observed. Psychological warfare, show of force. Maxwell's tactical mind rapidly assessed options. Active countermeasures. Surface-to-air defenses are online, but engaging will constitute an act of war against what are likely government assets, Moore replied. Warn them off first, Maxwell ordered. Standard military protocols. If they continue approach, disable rather than destroy where possible. He turned to Aria. Get the children to the inner sanctum. Activate the convergence shields. She nodded, already moving. The inner sanctum had been specially designed with transformed steel that could channel ethereal energy into protective barriers, technology born from their understanding of the convergence. Read initiate emergency broadcast to our political contacts, Maxwell continued. Make it clear we're being attacked after a peaceful disclosure. More coordinate aerial reconnaissance. I want to know if this is the only assault force or part of a larger operation. The mountain complex transformed from school to fortress within minutes. Children were quickly moved to protected areas, while Blackwood veterans took defensive positions. Outside, automated turrets swiveled to track the approaching aircraft. Maxwell joined Aria in the inner sanctum, where the youngest children had been gathered. Despite the looming threat, she maintained a calm presence, using her ethereal nature to soothe their fears. Will they hurt us? A small boy asked, his silver-flecked eyes wide with worry. No, Maxwell assured him with absolute conviction. No one will hurt you while I'm here. He placed his hand on the central pillar of transformed steel, activating the sanctuary's most powerful defense system. The entire chamber hummed with energy as the convergence shields engaged, a perfect fusion of ethereal power and human technology. The shields will hold, he told Aria, but we need a more permanent solution. Wagner's masters won't stop with one failed assault. Then perhaps it's time we demonstrated exactly what the convergence makes possible, she suggested, her expression resolute. Maxwell understood her meaning immediately. Over the past 3 months, they had been developing their combined abilities in private, carefully exploring the limits of what their merged essences could accomplish. What had begun as simple sharing of powers, her light stabilizing his wolf, his shadow anchoring her ethereal form, had evolved into something far more profound. They had discovered they could manipulate reality itself in small ways, creating localized changes to physical laws. They had kept these abilities hidden, concerned about their implications. But with the sanctuary threatened and children at risk, that restraint might need to end. Together then, he agreed, taking her hand. Where their skin touched, energy surged, silver light intertwining with shadow in beautiful, terrible harmony. The bond between them widened, deepened, allowing their merged essence to flow freely between them. Maxwell's first wolf nature emerged partially, not the monstrous transformation of battle, but something more controlled, more refined. His eyes blazed, solid gold shadows coalescing around him like living armor. Aria's ethereal form brightened until she seemed composed entirely of starlight, only the threads of shadow marking her transformation. Hand in hand, they ascended from the inner sanctum to the mountain's peak. The approaching aircraft were visible now, black shapes against the darkening sky. Warning shots from the sanctuary's defenses flashed across their path, ignored as the formation continued its advance. They believe we won't engage, Maxwell observed, that we'll surrender rather than risk open conflict. A fundamental misunderstanding of what we've become, Aria replied. Together they reached out through their mod, not just to each other, but to the transformed steel throughout the mountain, to the crystalline flowers blooming across the landscape, to the very fabric of reality that had begun changing since the convergence. The air around Blackwood Mountain shimmered as unseen energies gathered. The approaching aircraft suddenly slowed, buffeted by winds that hadn't existed moments before. Electronic systems flickered and failed as reality itself warped around them. Maxwell and Aria weren't attacking the aircraft directly, but changing the nature of the space they occupied. Air thickened, becoming resistant to mechanical passage. Electronic signals dispersed before reaching their destinations. Fuel molecules refused to combust properly. One by one, the aircraft were forced to retreat or risk falling from the sky. No weapons had been fired from the sanctuary, no direct assault launched yet. The Institute's show of force had been rendered completely ineffective. They'll try again, Maxwell said as they watched the last helicopter turn away, with different technology, different tactics. And we'll continue evolving in response, Aria replied. That's how balance works. From their vantage point, they could see the sanctuary below, lights glowing within the mountain children and protectors, safe behind walls of stone and transformed steel. Beyond Blackwood Falls shimmered in the distance, a town forever changed by the ethereal energy that had seeped into it for a decade. What we did today, Maxwell reflected, manipulating reality itself, that's what Wagner truly feared. Not the children's abilities, but the potential of full convergence. With good reason, Aria acknowledged. Power like this demands responsibility. The children will need to understand that as their abilities grow. They descended back into the mountain, their merged energies gradually settling into more controlled forms. In the command center, they found Reed analyzing data from the encounter while Frank coordinated with defensive teams. They've withdrawn to beyond sensor range, Frank reported. No casualties on either side. What did you do to them? Reed asked, scientific curiosity overriding her concern. Their communications mentioned reality distortion before cutting out completely. We showed them the true potential of the convergence, Maxwell explained. Not as a weapon, but as a fundamental change to what's possible. Reed studied the readings from her instruments. The energy signatures are unlike anything I've recorded before, not ethereal, not biological, but something entirely new. She looked up at them with renewed awe. You've essentially rewritten the physical laws within a localized area. A demonstration, Maxwell clarified, to establish boundaries they'll understand. And to show them why weaponizing the convergence would be catastrophic, Aria added. Some powers should never be used as weapons. Reed nodded slowly, the implications settling over her. I'll prepare a detailed analysis, but preliminary findings suggest the convergence is accelerating. Not just in U2, but throughout the region. The very fabric of reality is changing. Which means we need to focus on guidance more than ever, Maxwell decided. The children must understand the responsibilities that come with these abilities. The mountain's communication system activated Moore's voice coming through with urgency. Colonel, you need to see this. Global news feeds right now. Reed switched the main display to international news coverage. Scenes from around the world showed gatherings of people and adults and children with silver-flecked eyes. Some demonstrated small manifestations of ethereal abilities. Tiny lights floating above palms, shadows moving independently, objects shifting without touch. It's happening beyond our region, Reed whispered. The broadcast didn't just reveal the truth. It triggered dormant convergence in people we never expected. The news anchor spoke over footage of a young girl creating crystalline flowers from bare earth. Following the mysterious global broadcast by Colonel Maxwell Blackwood, reports of supernatural manifestations have emerged worldwide. Authorities urge calm as scientists rush to investigate these unprecedented phenomena. This changes everything, Frank stated the obvious. We're not just protecting 100 children anymore. No, Maxwell agreed, watching the scenes unfold across the globe. Well, now we're guiding an evolution that's happening faster than we anticipated. The implications were staggering. What had begun as protection for a handful of affected children had become a global phenomenon. The convergence wasn't isolated to Blackwood Falls or even America. It was spreading worldwide, awakening in anyone with the genetic potential for change. Wagner needs to see this, Maxwell decided suddenly. Despite objections from his security team, Maxwell ordered Wagner brought to the command center. The former institute director entered under guard, his expression changing from defiance to shock as he absorbed the global news coverage. Impossible, he muttered, watching a businessman in Tokyo manifest silver light between his palms. The convergence should be geographically limited to areas directly exposed to ethereal energy. Perhaps ethereals have been among us longer than you realized, Aria suggested, seeding their essence into human bloodlines for centuries. Wagner's scientific mind visibly worked through the implications. If ethereal genes have been dormant in human DNA potentially for generations, then the convergence isn't creating something new, Reed finished his thought. It's awakening something that was always there waiting for the right catalyst. Our broadcast, Wagner realized, looking at Maxwell with newfound respect. You didn't just announce the convergence. You triggered it globally through some kind of ethereal resonance. Maxwell hadn't planned this outcome, but he recognized the truth in Wagner's assessment. Something in their merged energy transmitted through global communications had awakened dormant potential worldwide. Your institute sought to contain what cannot be contained, Maxwell told him. Evolution doesn't ask permission, Richard. This isn't evolution, Wagner insisted, though with less conviction than before. This is intervention. Perhaps they're the same thing, Aria suggested. Perhaps ethereals and humans were never meant to remain separate species. Wagner stared at the global scenes of awakening, his worldview visibly shaken but not yet transformed. Decades of belief didn't change in moments, not even for a man of science faced with undeniable evidence. This doesn't change the fundamental threat. Uncontrolled power is still dangerous. On that we agree, Maxwell said, which is why guidance matters more than control. Before Wagner could respond, new alerts flashed across the command screens. Reed rushed to her station analyzing incoming data. Energy spikes worldwide, she reported. The convergence is accelerating exponentially. Reality distortions, similar to what we experienced in the tunnels, are appearing in major cities. The display showed scenes of shimmering air in urban centers, doorways between places that should be separated by miles spontaneously forming and collapsing. People passing through them emerged changed, awakened their eyes showing the silver flecks of convergence. The veils between worlds are thinning everywhere, Aria explained, sensing the shifts through her ethereal nature. What began here is spreading globally. Wagner watched with fascinated horror. It's transforming the fundamental structure of reality itself. No, Maxwell corrected. It's restoring what was artificially separated. Humans and ethereals, physical and magical, they were always meant to coexist in balance. A different alert sounded, this one from the sanctuary's internal systems. Frank checked the readings with concern. Colonel, there's children in the inner sanctum, their convergence signatures are intensifying. Something's happening. Maxwell and Aria exchanged glances, their bond communicating volumes without words. Together they moved swiftly toward the inner sanctum, Wagner and Reed following under guard. The scene that greeted them left even Wagner speechless. The 20 youngest children sat in a perfect circle, hands joined, eyes glowing solid silver. Above them hovered a sphere of pure energy, not ethereal light, not shadow, but something that seemed to contain entire universes within its swirling depths. What are they doing? Reed whispered, instruments frantically recording the phenomenon. Creating, Aria answered simply, or perhaps remembering. Within the sphere, images formed landscapes, both familiar and alien beings of light and shadow living in harmony, technologies merging seamlessly with natural forces. A world where the barriers between physical and ethereal had never existed. The world that was, Aria continued, recognition dawning in her eyes. Before the separation, before ethereals and humans became distinct species. They're accessing genetic memory, Reed realized. Ancestral knowledge encoded in DNA activated by the convergence. Wagner stepped forward, military bearing forgotten in his scientific awe. That's our past. Humans and ethereals evolved from the same source. Not evolved from, Maxwell corrected, understanding flowing through his bond with Aria. Artificially divided from. Something in our distant past, a cataclysm, a war, perhaps even a deliberate experiment, split what was once a single species into physical and ethereal branches. And now we're reuniting, Aria concluded, coming full circle after thousands of years of separation. The children lowered their hands, the sphere dissolving into particles of light that settled over everyone present. Where the light touched, awareness expanded. Knowledge flowed not as information, but as recognition, truth that had always been present, but hidden behind veils of forgetting. Maxwell understood then with perfect clarity why his family had protected the supernatural for generations, why the first wolf bloodline resonated with ethereal energy, why the convergence felt like returning home rather than becoming something new. We remember the children spoke in unison, their voices harmonizing in otherworldly chorus. We are whole again. Wagner watched the phenomenon, his scientific mind battling with the implications. The children weren't becoming something alien, they were remembering what humanity had once been. His entire career had been dedicated to preserving human purity against a threat that was in fact humanity's own forgotten nature. If this is true, he began, his voice losing its customary certainty. Your institute's purpose was never wrong, Richard, Maxwell told him, placing a hand on the older man's shoulder. Protecting humanity remains essential. But humanity is more than you believed. Outside, the night sky filled with aurora-like lights as the convergence wave spread globally. Not a catastrophe, but an awakening, a remembering of what humanity had always been beneath the amnesia of separation. The sanctuary's communication systems activated with incoming messages from around the world, political leaders, military commanders, religious figures, all experiencing the convergence in their own ways, all seeking guidance from the man who had first announced this evolution. Wagner turned to Maxwell, the weight of decades visible in his eyes. If what these children are showing us is true, then everything I've fought for was based on incomplete understanding, Maxwell finished for him. The same incomplete understanding my ancestors had when they first encountered ethereals. The difference is they chose protection rather than control. And now Wagner asked a lifetime of certainty crumbling before his eyes. Now we have a choice, Maxwell answered. Continue fighting against our own evolution or help guide it responsibly. For the first time, uncertainty crossed Wagner's features, the look of a man whose foundational beliefs were being challenged by irrefutable evidence. And if I choose to help, then you join us in establishing protocols for the newly awakened, safety measures, educational resources. Maxwell studied him carefully. Your expertise in containing ethereal energy could be adapted to teaching control instead. A rehabilitation offer, Wagner observed dryly. How generous. A recognition of reality, Maxwell corrected. The world is changing before our eyes. We need every capable mind focused on guiding that change responsibly. Wagner fell silent, watching as the children continued their communion with ancestral memory. The perfect circle they formed, hands linked in unity, represented everything he had feared and perhaps everything he had secretly hoped humanity might become. I'll need time, he said finally, to process all of this. Take it, Maxwell replied. We have work to do. Maxwell Blackwood, descendant of first wolves, protector of ethereals, stood with Aria at his side. Together they represented what humanity was becoming, not the end of human existence, but its completion. The rejoining of separated halves into a whole greater than its parts. Now we guide them home, Aria said softly, crystal flowers blooming where her feet touched the ground. Maxwell nodded, golden light emanating from within him, merging perfectly with her silver radiance. Together, the children gathered around them, first generation of a remembered future, their silver eyes bright with ancient knowledge newly awakened. Beyond the mountain, the world trembled on the edge of transformation, frightening to some, miraculous to others, inevitable to all. The sanctuary had fulfilled its original purpose, protecting those who needed shelter. Now it would become something greater, a beacon for a humanity remembering its true nature, returning to balance after millennia of division. Maxwell looked out over the changed landscape, silver flowers and shadow vines intertwining beneath an aurora-lit sky. The journey ahead would not be simple or without conflict, but the path was clear. Evolution, remembrance, return. The last guardian of the old world had become the first guide to the new. And somewhere in the vastness of existence, ethereals and first wolves, who had long watched over their separated children, finally saw their patience rewarded. The convergence had begun.